So, Mace, when did you become interested in aviation?
A little bit later than I think most people imagine. Since I ended up with the Thunderbirds, which I guess we don't need to bury that lead based on this giant helmet behind my head. Um, I would get asked all the time, like, what air shows did you go to as a kid? Like, when did you see the Thunderbirds fly that made you want to be a pilot? And I grew up in a small town in northern Wisconsin, a rural area. So my hometown's about 4,000 people. We lived 7 miles outside of it, like next door to my grandparents' dairy farm. So I was very much like a free range, outdoor, adventurous child, but I wasn't exposed to the military or to aviation. So I was one that loved an adrenaline rush. I loved roller coasters. I wanted to travel. I wanted to get out of my hometown. And when I was in high school, my parents were like, hey, you have really good grades, but we don't have a college fund for you. Let's put those grades to use and look at scholarship opportunities. So we did some exploring. Eventually, Air Force ROTC rose to the top, which is, I'm sure your audience is pretty familiar with the different ways to commission, but that's like one of the three ways you can become an officer in the Air Force. So you go be a normal college student, but you take military classes at the same time. You do physical fitness stuff in the mornings. And then when you graduate college, you commission as an officer, in my case, the same day. So I get an ROTC scholarship, but my plan at that point is to go to college as a criminal justice major because I'm going to do 4 years on active duty to pay back my scholarship time. And then I want to get out and apply to be an FBI agent.
Oh, okay.
That's
Wow.
right. So random. I don't know why. I was a big fan of the X-Files growing up, and I'm always like, what a weird thing that would be to inspire me to actually pursue a career in the FBI because as we all know, the X-Files is probably not the most accurate representation of
No.
that career field. But that was my plan. So about halfway through college, I had seen jets fly over, I think during like a sporting event, national anthem flyover, and I thought it was really cool, but I'd never really seen them close up. So we go on a base visit to Tyndall Air Force Base down in Florida. And while we're there, like one early evening, we're out on the ramp, so really close to the runway, and two F-15s take off, one after the other in full afterburner. And the sun is starting to set a little bit, so the flame is just like
Yeah.
really visible. I mean, jet noise vibrates your whole body. I get goosebumps, and I'm just like, forget the FBI. I have to try to go do that. And obviously, a lot has to happen between that moment of being like, you know what, I'm going to go be a fighter pilot, and then it actually coming to fruition. So I'm sure we'll get into all of that. But it was literally a single moment of inspiration that took me from being like, oh, yeah, that seems like this cool thing, but I have this other dream to nope, new plan. This is what we're going for.
Yeah, absolutely. So, can you talk us through some of your, like, obviously you joined the Air Force and some of your initial training on the aircraft you started flying on before you went to the F-16?
Yeah. So I decide that day I'm going to put my name in the hat for a pilot slot when that time comes around. I do that. I get one. I go off to initial flight screening, IFS, which is in Pueblo, Colorado. And there you learn to fly the DA-20. So super small airplane. Your Velcro would get stuck to your instructor's Velcro. Um, I think it cruises along at like 80 knots. It was my very, very first introduction to aviation. And IFS is screening, it's a screening program to weed out people that don't have the ability to learn, or maybe they get really motion sick, or they just decide they don't like it. It's just a way to weed out people before they go into the T6, which is what you go into in pilot training, which costs a lot more money to fly.
Mhm.
So this is my first, exposure at all. Like I've never made a radio call before. I have no idea how an oil system works. Like I'm trying to learn, boldface where we stand up in front of the rest of our flight and they're like, you just lost your engine. What are you going to do? Or you get this warning light. Now what? And all this is brand new. There were a few points during my career where I had moments where I was like, I don't know if I'm the right person for this. This is so much. And that was definitely a time where I felt like I was drinking from a fire hose because we were there for just shy of 4 weeks and we got through initial solo while we were there. So I went from not having any idea what runway markings even looked like, never touching
Mm.
an airplane, to flying my solo in like 3 weeks, essentially.
Yeah, and then I'm guessing you went on to, I'm guessing the T-38 as well. You went on to that?
Yeah, so first I went from IFS, made it through there. I was like, all right, let's go on to
Yeah.
actual pilot training, which is a year-long program. Everyone starts out in the T6. And so prop airplane can pull around 6 Gs, flies 300 knots, tandem seats, ejection seat. Great little airplane. I would totally buy one of those if I had millions of dollars laying around. And you learn all the basics there. So, you start off in just learning the basics of takeoff and landing and the basic handling of the aircraft, but you get into formation flying, you get into instrument flying. You do all that for about 6 months. And then at that point, you go through track select, where the class splits into different pipelines depending on what aircraft they will, or I guess they hope to eventually go fly. So, 6 month point, now you split into either helicopters, which is usually just one or two people that do that, the T1, which is heavies. So they're going to go fly, C-17s, C-130s, KC-135, so cargo or air refueling. And then you split into the fighter bomber track. When I saw the F-15s take off, it wasn't this moment of inspiration of like, oh, I want to be a pilot in the Air Force. It was, I want to be a fighter pilot in the Air Force.
Right.
So I had very specific goals. So I made it through that wicket, go down the T-38 track, which you have to be in the top half of your class to be eligible for that. And there were only 6 spots for my class of 25 students. So
Wow.
that was like the first big hurdle. Well, not the first, but one of the big gates you had to make it through. So now we're all flying the T-38. It has afterburner. It's a little jet trainer. I think most people are pretty familiar with it. It's been around forever. NASA uses them still. And that was quite the leap from a T6 to a T-38. It just handles so differently. It's very easy to over-G that airplane, which I might have done. Me and every other student, I'm pretty sure those are probably pretty bent at this point. And then you do that for another 6 months before you get to find out what aircraft you're actually going to go fly on, like in operational Air Force. And that's at track select, or sorry, that's at drop night. So that's when you find
Yeah.
out, F-16s, F-15s, whatever it's going to be.
And obviously, drop night. How did you feel when you got posted to the F-16?
Oh, amazing. I will never forget that moment. They really messed with me a lot, though.
Right.
It's really competitive to get a fighter. Most classes were getting between 1 and 3 available, and we have 6 of us that are in this T-38 pipeline that are eligible. And the guy that was first, we all knew was first. He had just crushed every single check ride, just done exceptionally well. And then it was between myself and another student for that second spot. Like, him and I were close enough in our scores. Like, we don't get to see the ranking like the flight commander has, but we
Oh,
can
okay.
kind of like guess where people are at. So him and I were unsure which of us was second and which of us was third. And then it kind of came down to our last check ride. And I ended up doing, it was actually, I think, my best check ride of the program. I did well on that one. And he struggled a little bit. So I thought that probably bumped me into spot 2, but I'm not sure. And also, there's no guarantee you're going to even have 2 fighters available. It could just be 1. So my class, every class comes up with like a fun way to show people what aircraft they're going to get. So all your friends and family are there. It was at the Officers Club on a Friday night. They had Google Earth, and it would go from Columbus, Mississippi, where our pilot training base was. It would zoom out, it would circle around, and then it would zoom in on the base you were going to, and then your airframe would pop up. So I had put F-16s as my first choice, and those at the time were training at Luke Air Force Base in Phoenix, Arizona. So I'm in Mississippi. So what I want to see is, this map zooms out and I'm up there in front of everyone. It circles around and it goes to Arizona. All of the pilots that were instructing us knew that I was getting my F-16. I didn't. So they're like, let's mess with her because this is going to end with what she wants. So it's the perfect
Yeah.
opportunity. So I got to go last. Out of 25 people, I was the last one to find out. I was like, seriously, watching everyone else get their airframes. And then what I was worried was going to happen is that I was going to become a FAPE, a first assignment instructor pilot, where you stay at your pilot training base for 3 years and you teach other students. And then you get a second go at trying to get a fighter. That happens to a lot of people who are good enough that they could get a fighter, but there just weren't enough available. So they're like, rather than go into an aircraft I didn't really want, I'll do a kind of a 3-year penalty lap as a first assignment instructor pilot. Then I'll get to compete again and maybe I'll get a fighter. So a lot of people end up doing that. So it zooms out from Columbus, circles around, zooms back in on Mississippi. And I'm like, I'm going to be a FAPE. And then it zooms out and goes to Arizona. And then F-16 pops up. And I'm like, you assholes. But I also was so excited. It was surreal. I had a lot of moments of stress watching that happen. And then just sheer excitement. And then I kind of like blacked out. Like I don't remember it specifically. You know, when something really exciting happens, you're just like, I think I just time traveled.
Clue what's going on. Yeah.
So it was a massive adrenaline rush. And then it was really off to the races from there because I did well in pilot training. I think I just had some natural aptitude for flying and I worked my butt off. And kind of the combo of those two things, got me that F-16. But when you actually get to flying a fighter, the demands, the knowledge you need to have, the demand on your body, everything just goes up so much that it was like, I always compare it to being a really good student. Say in high school, you're like your valedictorian. And then you get into Harvard and you get to Harvard and you're like, oh, I'm just like average here, or I'm okay, or I'm maybe like bottom of the pack here because everyone around me is really good. That's kind of what it's like making that leap to a fighter.
So can you talk us through some of your ground and flying training in the F-16? And like as you say, like was it a massive leap forward coming from like the T-38 world?
For sure, that jet just has so much thrust available, and you can really get yourself into trouble with your left hand if you don't stay on top of watching your airspeed. Like you can accidentally go supersonic. You can it can get away from you. So I'm trying to remember because it's been a minute. So this was like 2011 into 2012 that I was learning to fly the F-16 for a year. We did a handful of sims. Everything kicks off with ground training with academics. So you're going through like systems academics, learning about like basic systems, hydraulics, oil system, electrical system, all that kind of stuff. You start to get into some tactical things with like the radar, like the warning system, like your chaff and flare system, like all kind of the tactical stuff starts to come in. And you start to do some simulators where you focus on emergencies. It's really building block. You have to be able to handle, flying a flame out, like attempting to land with a flame out engine, or knowing what to do if you have an oil system malfunction, or all that kind of stuff. Just like I did in the DA-20 is where you start in the F-16. Everything's just a lot more complicated. And then I'm pretty sure we had 5 rides with an instructor in the back seat of a D model, which has 2 seats, before we did our solo. So I think the solo was on the 6th ride, if I'm remembering correctly. It was really quick. It felt really quick. And the F-16 is a hard airplane to land. And it comes in fast. People will flare at the wrong height and have hard landings and so there's a lot of like things aren't right, just go around. And I think everyone uses that several times in the B course when they're learning to fly it. And so it's a lot when your approach speeds like 150 plus knots. Things are coming at you pretty quick on final. So, and that's just landing, right? That's like the basic skill you need to be able to do in your sleep, because you have to execute the tactics, where I think that's where I started to feel like, oh, there's so much more here than I've ever felt like I needed to learn before, because I had already learned to fly the DA-20 and then the T-6 and the T-38 and the formula that they teach you with, systems, academics, simulators. All of that is kind of the same for each airframe. The stuff just gets more complicated. But then you're like, okay, cool. You can land, you can take off, you can deal with an emergency now. Now we're going to throw all this super technical stuff on top of it, where you need to know all of these numbers and like beeps and squeaks and how different waves interact with others and like radar cross sections. And remember, I'm a criminal justice major. I am like, what? Like, I don't even know what that word means. So that was, again, back to drinking from a fire hose.
Yeah, absolutely. So, what would you say, like going through training with the strengths and weaknesses of the jet? And did you train? Was it more air to ground, air to air? Like, what was your process going through training on in that sense?
Yeah, you have blocks. So you start off doing like the basic stuff of learn to fly the airplane, how do I shoot an instrument approach, all that stuff. And then we got into air to air first.
Mhm.
So basic fighter maneuvering, BFM, aka dogfighting, is like one of the fundamental skills. It is also, I think, a really dangerous time as a student because 9Gs is no joke.
Yeah.
And again, that left hand with the throttle, you can let that airspeed get away from you very quickly. And like you're doing high aspect BFM, so two jets, pointed at each other, and you're as soon as you pass that other one, you're rolling and pulling as hard as you can, and you might be going, you're going like 400 knots, and you're just hitting 9Gs instantaneously. There is a super high risk of G lock because you're not used to 9Gs yet. Your G strain isn't that good yet. You don't know when you should back off because you're young and you're hungry and you want to prove yourself and you have an ego. And that was like, I think as we got into that, I was just like, this is really hard. Like the first time I go head to head with my instructor in a jet and I'm supposed to like roll and pull 9Gs and then look up through the top of the canopy while I'm doing that and assess like the angle of his aircraft and what I should do with mine. In reality, at that phase, I think you're just trying to stay awake. And
Okay.
then you're trying to make all these tactical decisions. So that was really tough. By the time I got to air to ground, I felt like I got my feet under myself a little bit more.
Right.
And so now we're really focused on, all different sorts of attacks, but based on the conflicts we were in at that time, close air support was a big part of it, right? Operating with the guys on the ground, figuring out how to support them with strafe with the gun or dropping bombs, GPS guided or laser guided. And so you're just learning all these different attacks. And then you're learning about all the different munitions and the fuses and when you should use what and what's a valid attack and what information do I need from the guy on the ground who I'm talking to and how do I avoid not hitting him in the friendlies. And the complexity just increases very quickly the second half of that F-16 schoolhouse.
Absolutely. And how did you feel having a side stick for the first time? Was that like a bit of getting used to there?
I feel like it was almost not a factor.
Oh,
People ask
really?
that all the time. It felt so natural. I think if I was left-handed, I think it would be tougher.
Mhm.
But since it was on the right and I was right-handed, it really didn't feel any different from having my arm like over my thigh for a center stick versus, 45 degrees to straight out to the right side. And I know a lot of people always ask about that. And I felt like it was such a natural transition that was a very minor thing in the scope of all of the new things.
Yeah, absolutely. So, what was your first frontline squadron?
Yeah. So finish up the B course, get to go to Misawa, Japan, to the 13th Fighter
Nice.
Squadron, the Panthers, which is a SEAD squadron, so suppression of enemy air defenses. I don't know how well versed your audience is in that, but you're the people that go in first, essentially get shot at by the bad guys' surface to air missiles so that you can see where they're at, and then you try to shoot them back. So it's, you're kind of like bait, essentially, to clear the way for everyone else behind you. So it's a really cool mission when you get good at it and you're part of a really high performing squadron, which that squadron definitely was. When you're new and it's your first unit, talk about tactical overload. The seed mission is so complicated. I just remember feeling, again, extremely overwhelmed for at least the first year, just being like, how do all these things interact? Like, what's their ranges and when can they see me? And how do I see them without getting shot down? And how do I work with my wingman? And it's just a lot of moving pieces.
Yeah, and I have to ask, like one of our favorite subjects on this channel is DACT or BFM. Did you ever get to fly against maybe the Koreans? Like I'm guessing do they have F-16s and F-15s? Did you ever get to play with them?
So the most dissimilar I got to do was with the Japanese F-15s.
Oh, nice. How did
Yeah,
that work out?
um we won. I would say
Right.
it was interesting. The Japanese are great to work with, but there's definitely different learning styles, I would say, in the air and in the squadron. The culture is very different. And what I saw is I'm a lieutenant, I'm maybe 6 months in my squadron the first time I fought them. So I'm not that good yet. I'm very
Right.
new. But how I saw it in the culture in our units is you're very empowered to make decisions airborne. Like you get given tools where like you probably will see this is what you should do if you see that, but you're kind of empowered to make decisions real time as the scenario changes. What I saw more fighting against the Japanese guys, because I'm brand new lieutenant, not that good, used to getting my butt kicked by my instructor, and I do dissimilar with them, and I'm like winning every time. I'm like, wow, this is a new thing. But it was because no matter what I did, I think I was paired up with, again, one of their younger pilots, so probably a similar experience level to me or a little bit more. No matter what I did with my jet, they would do the same thing. Like if I, you know what I mean? So if I changed my game plan, they wouldn't change theirs. It would be exactly the same every time.
Right.
So you're kind of like, wait, if you see this, you see me do this instead, you should respond by moving and we would try to do that in the debrief because they're our friends, right? We want to work together. And they would be like, oh, yes, makes sense. And then we would go fly again that afternoon and they would do the exact same thing they had done that morning. And you're just like, I don't know. I don't think it's like a aptitude thing where they like didn't understand because they all speak English really well. I think it really is the rigidity of the culture is just very different, right? Like, I think they're kind of like, this is the plan that we execute in this scenario. Go do it.
And what F-16s were you flying at the time? What blocks? And were you with the GE engines or with the Pratt and Whitneys?
Yes. So I had GE engine. I was in a block 50 there. And
Nice.
funny story, I do a lot of keynote speaking now. And I just spoke to GE Aerospace last month. And I had the fun story to tell them because they're, of course, when I do a pre-call with them, they're like, did you use our engines? What did you think of our engines?
Yeah.
Um, and I'd flown both at different times from both Pratt& Whitney and GE. And I had learned to fly in a Pratt& Whitney engine, a Block 40, I think, in Arizona. So heat of the summer. On the scale of F-16 engines that have more or less thrust, that's on the lower side, still a
Yeah.
lot. But I was new and young and I was given that game plan of like, you see this, you do this. And so I still have that same very building block mentality when I get to Japan, when I start doing BFM there. I'm like, okay, fight's on. I should light the afterburner. I should wait a few seconds. I should wait for this cue. I should pull all the things. So I get to Japan and I do a local area orientation flight, which is essentially just like getting the lay of the land. It's not
Yeah.
tactical. It's really low threat. It's almost like not graded. My first like real tactical training flight is a BFM flight. So I go out there now. It's December in northern Japan, where Misao gets like 200 inches of snow per year. It's cold. So learn to fly in a Pratt& Whitney Block 40 jet in the summer in Arizona. Very, very hot. Now I'm in the cold weather in Japan in a GE engine in a Block 50. In hindsight, I really wish we would have focused more time on the brief talking about how differently the thrust available would affect the mission and my execution. We didn't, and I'm so young that it's not like that's not the primary thing I'm thinking about. So we start the fight, call fights on, I'm offensive. I do what I had done in training before, full AB, leave the throttle there. Because
Oh,
that worked in
right.
Arizona in the summer. And
Yeah.
you have your brain is trying to process so many things that you're like, what can I set and forget? Like, okay, that's good. That I know that's where that's supposed to be.
Yeah,
Let
that'll
me
do.
worry about all the other 1,000 things I'm trying to figure out while I'm pulling 9Gs. So I do that. I roll, I pull, I instantly hit 9Gs. I'm G straining my little heart out.
Oh,
And I'm like not seeing any change in where my instructor's jet is. I'm supposed to be able to pull and point at him.
mhm.
And I'm pulling and pulling and pulling, and I'm maintaining 9 Gs, and I'm G-stringing as hard as I can. I'm getting tired, and I'm like, my jet is not getting any closer to pointing at him. What the hell is happening? And I'm so confused. Long story short, I pull 9 Gs for about a full 360-degree turn.
Mm,
I have full light loss, as in blacked
mm,
out, but still aware of what's happening. I can still hear. So I'm like about as close to a G-lock as you can get without being
right.
G-locked. I get to that point, my instructor makes a radio call to knock it. He calls knock it off to end the fight, because he's watching me over his shoulder and he's like, why is she not pointing at me? Like, what is happening? We're just wasting all this gas. So can't see anything, hear that, pull the throttle back, jet slows down, vision comes back, very out of breath, disoriented. Like, why did that not work at all? And why was
Mm.
that so hard? How does anyone do that? I feel like I was about to die. We go to the debrief, we watch my tapes, and I should have been about 0.9 Mach when I rolled and pulled
Oh
to
no.
try to enter his turn circle. We watch, and I like rapidly go supersonic. I'm
Wow.
above the Mach. I'm like Mach 1.2. I roll, I pull. The jet's going so fast that it just holds 9 Gs. Like the energy is so high that I can maintain 9 Gs, not losing any airspeed. I'm at like, I was over 500 knots by quite a bit. I just remember that. So I'm going so fast, I can never point at him because my circle that I'm carving is ginormous. So I'm just never going to point at him. It's
Yeah.
physics make it impossible. But I also almost G-lock myself.
Mm,
So
that's
it
not
was
good.
second flight in country, as mentioned. I'm just like trying to show up and be like, I deserve to be here. I'm going to figure this out. And then I go into that debrief and I'm like, oh shit, this is
And
real. Like, this
do you actually get in
dangerous.
trouble for that? Like, if you like hit the mark, do you get in trouble for that in the debrief?
We were in the airspace where it was allowed, so we didn't have to
Oh,
like fill out
okay,
any
right.
paperwork or anything.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say you get in trouble in the debrief really, because the whole point of it is to, look at the mistakes in a way we can learn from them. So they try to create that environment where it doesn't feel like you're getting in trouble. We always say like there's mistakes and then there's like purposely choosing to do the wrong thing.
Oh, yeah.
And
Yeah.
I'm very much at the mistake phase at that time. It's not like I was like, let's go supersonic so I
Yeah.
can check that box. I had
Jump
no
at the
idea
end.
I
Yeah.
was supersonic even at the
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
I was just
Yeah.
fighting to stay awake. But I'm sure your audience will appreciate this. And I don't think I've actually told this story in this amount of detail on any podcast,
The
because
first then.
most like general podcast audiences that are about like leadership or personal development, it's complex as far as like the aviation points. But I'm sure you also know there's a tradition where fighter pilots only tell their call sign story
Oh,
in
yes.
person.
Yeah, in person. Yeah.
Um, so we're going to break that rule because I can't bury the lead forever because I'm in the public spotlight a lot right now and I talk about it in my book. So I'm like, if I write about it in my book, I can't be like, you're going to have to buy me a beer and see me in the airport by happenstance if you want to hear the story. So there's that flight, that exact dogfight that earned me my call sign, MACE, which stands for Mock at Circle Entry.
That's brilliant. Well, thanks for sharing that,
Yep.
yes. Great.
Yeah.
Exclusive for
And it was
us.
terrifying.
Yeah, absolutely. But have you ever flown in live theatre? And if so, did you feel prepared for, going to live combat?
Yes. So I went to Afghanistan in 2016. I only got to go once. I actually really enjoyed my time deployed. It was really nice to actually do the mission finally, because I've been training
Yeah.
for it at that point, for 5, 6 years. You're like, let's go do this thing. But there is also definitely a level of stress and anxiety and
Mhm.
like realizing what happens if you mess up in this environment. I think our spin up, like the 4 to 6 months beforehand, where we really, really focused on close air support because that we knew that's what we were going to do, we got really good at it. So I was with the SPADs, the 457th Fighter Squadron out of Fort Worth, Texas. It was a reserve squadron, but I was there as an active duty pilot.
Mhm.
So we had like 7 or 8 active duty pilots that were just embedded with that squadron. And I think it was actually the perfect unit for me to deploy for the first time with, because with most of them being reservists, there's like 10 weapons school graduates in that squadron.
Yeah.
Most of them are majors to colonels. Some of them had been to Afghanistan like 5, 6, 7, 8 times.
Oh.
And they're like, though that's my instructor for these spin up rides. Like, they're like, okay, this is my 7th deployment to Afghanistan. This is exactly the type of things you're going to
Yeah.
see. This is the things that can get you in trouble. This is blah, blah, blah. And one of the things I was told again and again is one of the first times you employ live weapons, if not the first time, it's going to be at night. Your wingman's going to be gone to the tanker to get gas. It's going to be danger close. There's going to be chaos. They're like, we train for all of these scenarios where like everyone knows exactly what's happening. We're
Yeah.
talking to the guys on the ground. The radios are crystal clear. They're like, this is not how it's going to go down. And so I felt really good at working all the avionics in the jet and handing off coordinates and doing a talk on and like coordinating attack with my wingman. Like, I'm going to drop and you're going to laze it in and all these things. Like, we were really good at that. But then you get there and there's so many variables that are outside of your control.
Yeah.
And I think it was the second time I dropped in combat. So not the first one. The first one was it was actually my first flight in country.
Wow.
I got to drop. And that was very smooth, not stressful. It was against like, I think a road or something that wasn't a person. It wasn't going to run away. It was like planned before we took off. So that was like, okay, we ripped that Band-Aid off. I've now done this once. But the most memorable employment of weapons I had in my entire deployment was I was the flight lead. My wingman was a brand new lieutenant, like essentially the equivalent of me in Japan 6 months after I got my call sign. We were employing against people. It was at night. It was pretty high stakes targets. And we had circled forever waiting to get clearance. Forever. And he's like, I need to go get gas. So he leaves, goes to the tanker. 5 minutes after he leaves, I get the voice on the radio that's like, hey, we just got clearance. You're cleared to drop. Let me know when you're in with direction. And I was like,
right.
Why is this exactly what they said it would be?
Yeah.
And we were shooting laser guided rockets. So I don't know if you're super familiar with that weapon, but it's small. Like, we could carry 7 in one pod on
Not
one
Maverick,
wing.
is it?
Not a Maverick, no.
Right.
These are much smaller than a Maverick.
Oh, okay, right.
Like, if you've ever seen the circular pod and it has like all of the little holes in it.
Oh, got
like,
you. Right. Yeah.
Each one of those. So it was a very useful, very good weapon, but it has to be lased in. And it's also delivered from a diving delivery. So what we would plan to do is, like, say if I'm going to shoot the rocket and my wingman's going to laze it in, or vice versa, I'm going to, do this diving delivery down into the dark in Afghanistan where it's just a black hole. Like, you have no frame of reference for depth. And so of course you're watching your altimeter, but that is when you start to get the heebie-jeebies of like, I feel like I'm about to smack into the ground, even though my altimeter says I'm not. Like, it's very uncomfortable. So you're going to dive in, wait till you're in range, pickle off a laser rocket. You're going to get washed out from your night vision because it's going to shoot next to your head. And then you're going to recover your jet. And mind you, it's Afghanistan. There's mountains everywhere.
Yeah.
Your wingman's going to be just chilling above you, flying circles, full attention in his pod, keeping his laser on the target, lasing it in, which is a full focus job. When you have one person that needs to do both of those things, it can be done, but there's a really high risk of messing it up.
Right.
Because you're trying to keep your pod locked while you're diving at the ground, while you're watching for range, while you're worried about hitting a mountain. And then you got to do a recovery and try to not break lock in your pod. And the time of flight for these things is very short. So I'm like, oh, they're like, we want this weapon right now. Like, you've got clearance, you're cleared hot. Like, let's get it. And I'm like, no, I'm like, my laser guy is at the tanker. So I'm like, okay, giddy up. This is about to like really test my skills. Right before I roll in, another voice comes on the radio and is like, hey, we're I think Black Widow, blah, blah, blah. We're a Army UAV that's been above you, like way up here, just monitoring the whole situation. We have the ability to provide terminal laser guidance. Would you like us to laser rocket in? Never heard this voice before. Like they had just been there the whole time monitoring.
Really?
I'm like, why, yes. Yes, I would like that. That would be
Yes.
great.
Yeah, pretty cool.
So I call in like with my heading and I'm diving, almost 30 degrees nose low at the ground into this black pit. The range for releasing the rocket is rapidly approaching and you have a very small window and I hear nothing from them. And normally like we would have confirmatory comm with each other. It'd be like, one's in, blah, blah, blah. And two would say, lasing. So you're like, okay, peace of mind. Everything's good. And I hear nothing. And so I heard the tapes from this employment later and my voice got like really high on the radio. And I'm like, confirm lasing? And they're just like, affirm. And so I shoot the rocket, it shacks the target, we get the weapons effect. And that was really stressful for me, but also I feel like it was such a cool representation of just the teamwork that goes on in that environment.
Yeah.
Like I had never met those people before. I've never met them since. I don't know what unit they were with, but I was trusting them. Like if they had not done their job, this attack would have been unsuccessful. We would have missed, and who knows where it would have gone. So it was very stressful, but it ended up going off kind of without a hitch. But of course, I got back to the squadron and I was like, it happened just like you guys said it would. My wingman was at the tanker.
Yeah, I think it's crazy because, like, I guess, like, our audience as well, like, they probably, some people, like, think, like, it's just a pilot, but there's such a big team effort going on behind the scenes as well, isn't there?
Yeah. It's rarely you in a vacuum just seeing something going down and deciding that you're going to, like, that person's life is at risk, so you're going to give yourself clearance and all of, like, you're usually talking to multiple people.